Hello everyone, I'm Darkside Phil, and welcome to another edition of the Hateful Truth video game review series, where I give you maximum truth and minimum bullshit regarding the latest video game releases. Now, ahead of time, I want to start by saying I apologize. I am a little bit under the weather. The seasons here are changing, and unfortunately that means that I get some respiratory problems. So please bear with me for the fact that my voice may be low during this video. I do kind of have a sore throat and a lot of things annoying me right now, okay? But this review, I feel, is going to be important because a lot of people want to know my opinion on a major game that had years and years of anticipation and hype behind it, and people want to know, did this game live up to expectations? Was this game all that we expected from it? A game that ever since I beat it on I beat it on Thursday actually, people have been asking me, Phil, when are you going to review it? When are you going to review it? Well, now is the time. Today, in the Hateful Truth, we are going to review Bioshock Infinite, okay? Now, Bioshock Infinite is an interesting game, just from the premise, okay? The developers of the original Bioshock have been spending years working on this game, and Ken Levin, actually, who's the head of the project, kind of said that you were going to get an experience out of Bioshock Infinite that's like nothing else you've ever played before. Now, in some ways I have to call bullshit because this game does draw quite a lot of similarities to the original Bioshock. But that's not a bad thing. The original Bioshock was a masterpiece in a lot of people's minds, and Bioshock Infinite, in a lot of ways, follows along those footsteps. So, the game starts off in the shoes of the main protagonist, Booker DeWitt, who really you don't know a lot about as the game starts. You're being whisked away to a lighthouse, which then shoots you into the sky to a floating city called Columbia. All you know is that there's a girl called Elizabeth who supposedly is imprisoned on this floating city, and that you need to break her out and basically get her and give her to someone in order to erase some debt that you have. Now, originally it's a gambling debt, but then obviously as there's more plot that's exposed later on in the game, there's a lot of mystery involved into what's really going on. Why are you really there? Who is Elizabeth? Why are you breaking her out? Elizabeth, when you finally do run into her, actually has some mystical abilities to actually create portals between dimensions. And so there's this whole awesome story, mystery aspect going on during the course of the game that keeps you hooked and riveted. And I have to say, even with the ending of the game, which I'm definitely not going to spoil, there is kind of an ending that makes you think at the end. It's kind of like Inception, the movie, where at the end you're like, gee, what really happened? But in this game, if you actually put the pieces together, you can definitively figure out what happened at the end. So it's a game that keeps you thinking, keeps you on your toes. It's a running mystery, and there's actually incentive in this game to find and pick up and listen to all of the I forget exactly what they're called, voxophones, which are basically recordings from characters in the game that are audio vlogs, audio files that you play. They give a lot of elaboration on the story, a lot of back information regarding the story of Bioshock Infinite and what is really going on, and by finding them, not only is it cool because if you find them all you get trophies and or achievements like in most games, but they significantly add to the background story of the game, and they're definitely worth trying to find. Okay, so that being said, now we've talked about the story, let's talk about the gameplay. Bioshock Infinite, in a lot of ways, draws similarities to the original Bioshock. You're in this weird kind of mystical, scientific city that who knew that this could exist. In Bioshock, it was underwater. In this case, it's a floating city. And because of that, there's a lot of cool elements added to the game, including having sky hooks, which is a kind of grappling hook that you use and you attach to these rails throughout the city that you can use to totally revolutionize the gameplay. It's not just a first-person shooter. There's all this crazy action based off of using the sky hooks. But in addition to the sky hooks, there's melee combat, and there's also guns and weapons that you can find during the course of the game and upgrade them at vendor booths. But there's also what are now called vigors, which are kind of similar to the plasmids from Bioshock 1, each of which is a unique and interesting ability that can aid you in combat and also sometimes with other things. So there's an ability that allows you to temporarily possess an enemy and they'll become your ally for a certain period of time until it runs out. There's an ability that allows you to shoot lightning out of your hands. There's an ability that lets you throw explosive grenades. There's an ability that allows you to shoot water at enemies or there's a cool thing about these abilities is they have like leveled up things that they can do as well. So for example, with this water ability, it's called Undertow, you have the ability to either wet someone, or you can use it as almost like Scorpion Spear from Mortal Kombat, where you can grab them and pull them towards you so you can get an up-close shot and they're completely vulnerable. So the gameplay of the game, over the course of the game, will change dramatically depending on which vigors and which weapons you actually choose to use. Now you may find a perfect combination. Maybe you really like using Undertow to pull your enemies towards you and then use a shotgun blast to instant kill them. But there's incentive to use variety in your attacks because all of the trophies and achievements of this game primarily are focused around getting a certain amount of kills with each weapon type, getting a certain amount of combinations with your vigors, getting a certain amount of kills with each vigor. In fact, there's combination kills that you can do. So there's actually a vigor called Murder of Crows where you send out crows to actually peck and attack at your enemies and distract them. And then if you do other things afterwards, like throw a grenade or shoot lightning, it does a special combination ability. And if you do those a certain amount of times, you actually get achievements and trophies. So the game, even though you can play the game the same way throughout the whole game if you choose to do so, can also be constantly evolving with the combat. And one of the coolest things about the game for me, gameplay-wise, was that I always had an incentive to try a new weapon, to try a new combination, and because of that there was a lot of variety in the style of the way that I played the game. Now, admittedly, I did not really use the skyhook that much for combat, but the skyhook can be utilized for combat. There's actually upgrades and abilities that you can buy over the course of the game that accentuate your combat with the skyhook, whether it's when you land and you're invulnerable for a certain period of time, or you do a flying attack off of the skyhook and you gain a special ability because of that. There's all kinds of variations based around the skyhook that also is a cool factor in the game, okay? So the gameplay is similar to the original Bioshock with a few twists that actually make it pretty neat, including being able to equip clothing to your body that give you different perks. You actually will find clothing, it's actually called gear in this game, that you can equip that will give you special stat bonuses. So you may find one that gives you double damage on critical hits, or maybe a higher chance to do a critical hit, and it's a hat. Or maybe you find a coat that gives you added defense against something. So these exist, and they, again, you can play the game how you want depending on what you find. Now, primarily the beginning of the game is about getting to the island, this floating island, and this floating city in the sky, finding Elizabeth and breaking her out. Once you free Elizabeth, the gameplay changes, because Elizabeth now becomes an NPC who is always with you. And she has her own unique abilities. As I said, she has the ability to create dimensional tears. So sometimes during combat, there'll be areas where as enemies are coming at you, she can create special items to help you. Maybe a hook that you can hook up to. She can create cover, so where there was no cover and you were getting shot up, you can defend yourself. Maybe she'll have, I created a stockpile of medical items or a stockpile of weapons and ammo for you. It's not always, but there are certain set places in the game world, especially where there's going to be bigger fights where this happens. So that's a neat added element. Now, similar to the original Bioshock, a lot of people may say that they find the game too easy because the game never really lets you die, per se. If you're on a skyhook and you fall off and you fly out into oblivion, the game just resets you back where you were before you fell off. If you actually do physically run out of health, Elizabeth will actually revive you an infinite number of times. So it's similar to the Vita Chambers in the original Bioshock. Once you run into Elizabeth, you're basically permanently alive. However, you do take a penalty in money. You will always take a penalty in money, and it may really start to hurt if you're dying repeatedly because you're fighting too not carefully enough, not taking cover. You're running around just running and gunning willy-nilly instead of actually paying attention to your health and your shields and stuff like that. Excuse me. So, even though some people kind of complained during the course of the game that it was too easy, there is still a challenge because you don't ever want to be out of money and now you can't afford to buy those upgrades and things that are going to make the game easier on you, okay? In addition to that, Elizabeth will also find health, ammo, salts, which is actually your ability to use vigors. She'll find these things for you during the heat of combat, especially when you're getting low on one particular thing. There's a chance she might find it. However, I did find that after she would maybe toss you ammo once, if you ran out again, that was it. She couldn't find it again. You'd have to be on your own, running around trying to find ammo and or another weapon to use. The only other, real major chunk of the gameplay in Bioshock Infinite is actually the looting / exploration aspect. And basically, you can get through this game without ever doing any of the side missions, because yes, there actually are optional missions in the game, which will be like, oh, there's a secret bar, there's a secret stash of weapons at a bar. Go to the bar and press a button underneath the cash register to open the secret stash. Some of them are not that easy. Sometimes you'll just find a code book, and it'll say, well, you found a code book, now you have to find a cipher somewhere, which is a code written on a wall. And once you do that, it should give you instructions on how to find hidden items in a hidden stash. You can completely ignore these if you want, but they do add to both the story and the gameplay of the game, because number one, you'll probably find either money or rare items that you're going to want to equip to make yourself stronger, and number two, you'll probably find a lot of voxophones, which are going to, again, give you supplemental audio logs that'll really flesh out the story of Bioshock Infinite. The way that I can best describe Bioshock Infinite is it has a lot of parallels to the original Bioshock, but I do think it's actually a better game. The original Bioshock, because you were underwater, you kind of felt confined. You felt like you were only going to be able to travel in one particular area at any time. There wasn't a lot of opportunity for kind of veering off and doing extra exploring. Now, there was some of that in the original Bioshock, but definitely not as much as in Bioshock Infinite. In Bioshock Infinite, you kind of get this feeling of open breadth because you're in a sky city. Everything around you is open. And not to say that it's a true open world game, it's not. There's only certain times when you can head on to certain areas or go between certain areas. But there seems to be a lot more exploration, a lot more, especially with the side content that I mentioned, a lot more opportunity for you to venture out and try to discover things rather than just going down the linear path that's straight in front of you. In addition, even though there is some backtracking, I'd say there's less than there was in the original Bioshock, and that was a pet peeve of mine about the original Bioshock, is that there were certain levels where you had to kind of go through them, then come back through them again later on, and it was kind of annoying that you had to do these things repeatedly. In this game, there's probably only maybe one time in the game when you do end up having to backtrack, and that's really only if you ventured out and explored for yourself beforehand when the game gave you an opportunity to. If you didn't, you will probably be going to those areas for the first time. The game does have a couple cool boss fights. Similar to the Big Daddies in the original game, now they have handymen, which are kind of similar guys, giant mechanized dudes who have a weak point on their chest. Now, you only fight about 5 of them in the game. It's not like the original Bioshock where you were constantly trying to kill those things in order to get your upgrades and stuff. In this game, it's a little different. They're more plot-based. You're at a certain point in the game, uh-oh, here comes a handyman you have to beat. But there are a couple boss fights that are pretty neat as well. There are a lot of different enemy types. You've got your regular soldiers. You've got, who are kind of like the Republican Guard. You've got the Vox Populi, who are the rebels, the people who are maybe the minorities who are being treated badly by the government and the police state that's in place, and they're fighting back. You have the crows, who are this religious order, who have the ability to actually turn themselves into a flock of crows. You've got robot enemies called patriots, which are robotic recreations of famous presidents and people from history, including George Washington and Abraham Lincoln and Ben Franklin. You've also got the handymen, as I already mentioned, and I'm sure I'm missing a few enemy types here and there. So there's a pretty good variety when it comes to enemies. Some people are definitely going to want to know that the game is an adult-oriented game. And it does tackle a lot of adult-oriented issues, okay? There's going to be an overlying theme of kind of sacrifice and almost like redemption and retribution. There's also a lot of serious adult content when it comes to social issues. This flying utopia of Columbia has just as many problems as the supposed utopia of Rapture had. But in this case, it's not splicers going nuts and just starting to kill people. It's actually racism and problem between the social relationships between people. The people who are in power in Columbia are basically wealthy white people who are keeping down everyone else. And all the minorities actually come together during the course of this game and fight against the racism and become the Vox Populi. Of course, once you have a rebel movement like that, it could have its own problems, and that also becomes a major theme in the game about 2/3 through. So, Bioshock Infinite is not afraid to tackle serious social issues, and I really feel this is a game that another one of those games where when you play it, you really feel like you are experiencing something serious, adult, unique, and it's a work of art, okay? It's a game that is so awesome with the combination of the amazing graphical design, the innovative gameplay, the story that keeps you hooked, the serious social issues that are tackled in this game. The game is pretty damn amazing. And I'm going to be honest with everyone, Bioshock Infinite is probably in my top 5 favorite games of the past years since I've ever played games on YouTube, okay? Since 2008, it's in my top 5 favorite games. And what I'm going to say is it's a tough call between the original Bioshock, which was something completely original, versus Bioshock Infinite, which is kind of taking a lot of the great things out of the original Bioshock and putting it into a new environment and a new plot. But I overall think that Bioshock Infinite, I do like it slightly better than the original Bioshock. And I know some people are going to say, oh, how dare you, the original is a classic, and blah, blah, blah. I completely agree. But from my personal experience with both of the games, I actually enjoyed Bioshock Infinite just a little bit more than I did Bioshock. Both have amazing stories with cool twists and great writing and amazing voice acting and amazing graphical design. That's another thing I do want to mention. Just the city of Columbia and all the different places you visit are gorgeous. The character of Elizabeth is one of the best designed, most vibrant, most realistic human characters I've seen in a video game since Heavy Rain, I would say. Every second that she's with you, they're talking to you, interacting with you, I thought this was a real person. I really felt that out of the game. And it takes a lot of fucking work to say that a game makes you feel like you're in the shoes of the person who you are, that you're with another real person. Elizabeth is one of the most vibrant, interactive characters. Just everything from, oh, the wind's blowing and the wisp in her hair, to the way her face reacts to things, to the things that she says. Amazing, okay? I can't really say too much negative about the game. I'm going to be honest, there were a couple things that were slight annoyances. Near the end of the game, there are a couple gauntlet-like areas where the game just... Now, it is the end of the game, so maybe that is the right time for it, but the game just fucking piles on the amount of enemies that are coming at you, and you really have to struggle to find cover and be using your vigors and your different weapons to survive, and it can be very, very difficult at certain parts at the end of the game. In addition, I did find I think I may have found 2 game bugs. But only one game bug is really apparently sticking out at me right now. And this game bug was that at the near the end of the game, there's kind of this sequence where you're on a blimp and a bunch of people are around you on blimps attacking you. And there's a door that, by the way, I forgot to mention this, Elizabeth gets the ability to lockpick and unlock locked doors for you, and by finding lockpicks hidden throughout the game, she can actually get you into secret rooms or locked rooms that have good loot and stuff inside of them, so it's worth it to try to find all the lockpicks and have her unlock as many doors as possible. There's this one door that's locked that she can't open because you're in combat. You're being attacked by all these blimps around me. And I admit, I had a tough time with the segment of the game. I died a couple times, and finally I killed all the enemies around me, but they still wouldn't let me open the door. The game claimed I was still in combat even though I wasn't. I had killed all the enemies around me. So out of the entire game, that was my one glaring game bug that really pissed me off. But outside of that, I didn't find any game bugs really. But the fact that in some parts the game does seem a little bit too easy because the game holds your hand with Elizabeth being this AI partner, and at other times because of the gauntlet of enemies that you're faced to fight over and over and over, that's really my only annoyance with the game. I think that outside of that, the game is a masterpiece. Ken Levin did an amazing job with this game, and he really does need to be applauded, and so do the voice actors. I know Troy Baker, I don't know, unfortunately, the name of the woman who did Elizabeth, but they did outstanding jobs, and really, when it all comes together in a package like this, you have to applaud the people who were involved and actually name them by name. So thank you, everyone who worked on this game. The game really was outstanding. The game has no multiplayer. You know what? That's fucking fine. And I applaud them that they didn't waste time having a development team work on multiplayer like what happened with Bioshock 2. It wasn't needed. It was superfluous. In this game, they said we're going to focus on an amazing single-player experience. That's what you get with Bioshock Infinite. Okay? And by the way, the game is about 10 to 12 hours long, especially if you take your time to explore around and loot everything and open all the locked doors and do all the side missions. You're going to get about that amount of content out of the game. But the cool thing is, because you probably did choose your perfect vigor weapon combination by the end of the game and play through a chunk of the game like that, it's fun to go back and replay the game and try different stuff. Oh, I used the flame vigor the whole time. I'm not going to use it at all this time. I'm going to try using lightning and water this playthrough. And then when you beat the game, you actually unlock 1999 mode, which is an extremely difficult mode that you actually get an achievement for beating the game on it. So there is incentive to go back and replay the game and try to find all the voxophones and try to understand the entire plot of the game. There is a little bit of annoyance at the end because they don't outright explain to you, dead to your face, what's going on. But if you found enough voxophones, or if you just do a little bit of internet searching, plenty of people have figured it out, and I actually figured it out too, and I'm very pleased with the plot of the game. I'm actually curious to see what the DLCs are going to be, because I purchased the Season Pass and they said there's going to be 3 DLCs, all story-based, because there's no multiplayer. So it'll be really interesting to see what story they flesh out as they come with these DLCs. So Bioshock Infinite is a masterpiece. It's not perfect, there are a very small amount of flaws, but Bioshock Infinite is an amazing game. Bioshock Infinite is one of my favorite games of the past several years. I give Bioshock Infinite a 9.5 out of 10. It's that damn good. This is not a game to pass up. I know the past several months there have been a lot of disappointments. You know, Gears of War, Judgment, God of War Ascension, these games that were kind of dialed in, they were unnecessary games. This is not just a cash-in. This is a completely unique game from the original Bioshock. It implements a lot of the best parts of that original Bioshock game. It is an amazing game that needs to be experienced. Especially if you're a fan of the original, you gotta get it. 9.5 out of 10, Bioshock Infinite, fucking great. Okay, thanks for joining me for this episode of The Hateful Truth. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you found that I gave you maximum truth and minimum bullshit about this game. And I will see you for future episodes. So thanks a lot for joining me. Peace out.